All right, so today we have some questions about Chinese language and learning Chinese language that we're going to answer from a Chinese language learner's perspective. So I hope this is interesting. Next is learning Chinese easier or harder than you thought? It is so much harder. In what aspects is it harder? Specifically, speaking and reading Chinese are completely independent of each other. You know, in English, you can look at a word, you sound it out. When you read Chinese, you can't sound it out. Learning to speak Chinese and learning to read and write Chinese are absolutely different, and one doesn't help the other. In addition to that, the tones. If you know anything about Chinese language, you know that in Mandarin there's 4 tones, and changing the tone changes the word. And that is awful for a non-Chinese speaker. Even with a lot of practice, tones are a normal mistake, and I make that mistake every time I open my mouth to speak Chinese. Next is, as an English speaker, what methods worked for you when learning Chinese? I don't know if anything specific transfers from being an English speaker into learning Chinese, but one thing that does stick out to me is learning sentence patterns. When you learn a pattern, you can just replace certain words, but the structure of the sentence is going to stay the same. So learning some patterns, I think, would be really helpful to really expedite your learning and your fluency. Yeah, another thing that's really, really helpful in Chinese is using measure words. Just like in English, there's a lot of measure words for counting different types of things. Like, you know, we have a bundle of something, or a bag of something. There's a lot of measure words in Chinese too, but in Chinese specifically, if you don't know the measure word, it's incorrect to do so, but it's understandable to just use the generic measure word called ge. And you can always use ge, and people will understand you even if it's wrong, and you know it's wrong and they know it's wrong, but you don't know the measure word. It's okay. Everyone can understand you. There's even a nice meme about using ge because you don't know the measure word. Next is, what are the most helpful things you learned that applied to your real life in China? Maybe numbers. Numbers are pretty easy. Number 2 would probably be food. When you can go to a restaurant and say that you want a bowl of beef noodles and you can say it in Chinese correctly, it feels good. I mean, as far as survival Chinese, saying I want or I need would be high on my priority list. Being able to hear and understand and speak time, I think, is also useful. Question number 9. How have you been learning Chinese? I haven't been. I learned Chinese just by living here. A lot of stuff can be learned through context. So if you're with someone who does speak Chinese and you're listening to a conversation in Chinese, once you learn some words, you can understand the context of a conversation, and if you want to, learn specific vocabulary or specific grammar, then you can ask about that specifically, and that's basically how I learn. I definitely recommend getting a teacher and having a structured learning environment. The last question today is, what do you think about learning online or in a classroom setting or via videos? So for speaking, I definitely think in person is the best way to go. I think tones are difficult to do like on a online class, and I don't trust software because like I've used some of the software that people use to test their English here, and it always gives me like a really bad score, but I'm certain that my English is sufficient. So yeah, for speaking, if you're gonna practice your tones, especially, I definitely think in person. If you're just having vocabulary or grammar or just a generic, like you just need to speak Chinese every day, online would definitely be a good one. You could probably get vocabulary and you could probably learn grammar pretty well. But if you, on a pre-recorded video, if you make a mistake, there's no correction unless it's, unless there's something else alongside the pre-recorded video that checks what you say or do. So that's all of our questions today. If you have more questions, you can leave your question in the comment and we will try to respond to you. And if we have enough awesome questions, then we will do another interview, I guess, with more questions about Chinese language. So thanks.